So I'd like to start by asking you a quick question, really, which is, when you go through the recruitment process, when you go through the hiring process, when you've gone through all the work to look at candidates, to bring them in, how can you be sure that you've hired the best person for the job? And the reason I ask this is because it seems to me one of the big anomalies in recruitment is that we always measure the performance of the individual that we want to be successful. And we never look at the people that perhaps weren't successful or didn't join us. And how do we know whether best is just good or whether good is just best? Does that make sense? And so the reason for asking this is because when we look at the recruitment process and when we look at bringing people in, we will often say, well, the managers have appraised them well, or their performance on the job is good, or when I look at the other people that have come in compared to them, they're doing X, Y, and Z. But the scientist in me says that's not good enough. That's a single point of data. And a single point of data doesn't prove anything. And so much of our work around assessment is based on comparing candidates to candidates. So we'll say, of the people that have applied, how many passed this test, how many passed that test, how many achieved this, how many achieved that, who's got this qualification, who's got that qualification. But again, the question that I raise is, what if that is only marginal difference? If the great span of talent is this big, how do you know that you're not just assessing a group of people from a very small proportion of it? And that was one of the questions that we were really vexed with at Penguin Random House. We had a huge amount of talented people that were applying for jobs with us. People that many, many employers would look at and say, these people are incredible, they are fantastic, they come from the best universities, they've been to some of the best schools, they have some of the best experience. But are they the best people to do the job? Or are they simply just the candidates that we're getting? And we started to ask ourselves the question, what if? What if we were only seeing a really small subsector of the people who could perform well for us? What if we expanded that out? What would we find and what would we see? Could it possibly be that the people that would be best at doing a job actually aren't even applying to us? They're put off, they don't apply for some specific reason, or they don't even think that working for us is one of a realm of possibilities. Are there people out there who could be quite fantastic, quite brilliant, but we never ever see them? And instead we remain satisfied by choosing the best of the group of people that we have. Not the best people, just good people. And I want to talk a little bit about education, because education is one of the areas that we wanted to tackle. It's very, very difficult when you're an employer and you're receiving applications from Oxbridge, Cambridge, the Russell Group, consistently. When you look at the people within your organisation, and so many of them have been to those universities themselves. We did a study very recently where we asked people how many people had been to university within the entire organisation. The figure was overwhelming. When we then looked at which universities they'd been to, the number one university was Oxford, and out of the top 10, 9 were Russell Group. The other one was actually specifically related to creative writing and English literature. So in that realm, it's very easy to become convinced that going to the top universities equals being top talent, because you've got a group of people that have come from that background themselves, and they look and they say, well, in order to be as good as me, you must have done the things that I've done. And when you've got an applicant pool that most people would die for, it's very easy to believe that that must be the case too. Now, who in this room believes that the British education system is a meritocracy? The lights are pretty dark, but I don't see any hands. You have to be an absolute fool to believe the British education system is a meritocracy. So I'm really glad no one put their hands up, because that gets a little bit awkward. And simply being because we know that access to good schooling is related more to economic success than it is to academic performance. We know that geographical differences exist in how people's education experience goes. And we know that the universities are still, although struggling, nowhere near being a meritocracy in terms of the way that they offer places. You can look at the proportion of people that go to public schools that are successful in getting into the top universities. If that's the case, why, as recruiters, would we outsource the selection process by using academics as a means of selection to universities? Why would we assume that people's performances in A-level were somehow a predictor of their performance in work? And it's a very, very simple question that we wanted to test and we wanted to ask ourselves. We wanted to say, actually, are these things really valid? Can you make a difference if you change them? What happens when you pay no attention to academic qualifications whatsoever? We wanted to try and take a completely different view of the way in which we selected people and the way in which we appraised them. And in order to do this, we wanted to say, what happens if we open the funnel up entirely? We base all our criteria around job-related characteristics. We look at changing the candidate experience so that we take away as many barriers as possible from people who are coming into the recruitment process. We tell them what they're going to be assessed against in advance. We try and make it as level a playing field as possible, as much of a meritocracy as possible. Even to the smallest level where we explain to people what to wear to interview. And here's a really simple point. If you come from a family which has connections with the industry in which you work, or you come from a family where people have experience of working in particular professional sectors, you will get a level of advice about how to be in an interview, about what to wear, about how to welcome people, handshakes, eye contact, a whole range of different things that people from other backgrounds may not have. Not necessarily will not have, but may not have. As human beings, we then all make selection decisions based on that. So they were really confident. I really liked them. You know, they had good firm handshake, you know, great eye contact. They were brilliant. I really liked the way they were dressed. The flip side to that is the potentially highly talented individual who comes in, who suddenly finds that they're wearing a suit and tie and they've come to a publisher where if you wear a suit and the tie, you must be the CFO because nobody else does. They suddenly lose confidence. Oh my God, I'm not dressed like anyone else. I feel a fool. Why am I doing this? I start to, move my tie at the neck. I start to feel really anxious about kind of what I'm doing. All of that detracts from your performance in selection. So by simply leveling the playing field, telling people what to do, how to do it, and what requirements there were, we hope to see whether there were any real differences in outcomes. One of the earlier speakers talked about job profiles. And one of the key criteria we found as well was changing the copy that we used. People were deselecting from applying to us because, quite frankly, we sounded so up our own backsides that they felt that you must be a private school, Russell Group educated person in order to work there. It felt really exclusive. So we will start an advert by telling you how many Booker Prizes we have won. Okay, we wouldn't say, actually, we're a really friendly company, we're really nice people, it's really casual. Actually, it's really relaxed, and we do some really good books. So by changing the copy, by being more inclusive, what we wanted to try and do was to see, could you get more people in? Could we assess them against criteria that were based entirely about the job, with no reference to academics, no reference to CVs, no reference to previous experience, no reference to internships, or anything along those lines? And what we found was that 50% of successful candidates came from backgrounds that would have been precluded under our previous approach. So just to be really clear, by measuring everyone against the same standards, against exactly the same benchmark, 50% of successful candidates would have been ruled out by previous barriers that we had in place. And when we took those out, when we gave them information about how to apply, about the sort of process, and when we said we will judge you purely on your answers to work-related questions, they were successful by exactly the same benchmark. And what it strikes me based on this is one of our issues around, if you like, talent attraction or recruitment is we try and make it easy. And for me, it shouldn't be easy. in some ways, recruiters should be working much, much harder than candidates. Because quite simply, if we go to the first possible right answer, we will never know whether we're getting the best talent that could possibly be there. If we go on the basis of making sifting decisions or shortlisting decisions based on things that make it easy for us, how will we know whether we're missing out on the rest of the talent spectrum that would never be there? And if we make decisions that are simply based on our perceptions of what good is versus the criteria that are related to a job, the criteria that are really important to being successful in the role, how will we know whether we're assessing against the right things? And when we did this, one of the most remarkable pieces about our decision to remove degrees wasn't simply the removal of the degrees. Other companies had done that. What was remarkable was the media storm that it caused. So we were the #1 most read news story on the BBC News site that day. We made Vogue, we made the newspapers in the US, in Australia, and across the world. Why? Because people's preconceptions of the industry was one which said, oh, that isn't something that they would do. And so in its way, we also proved ourselves to be right by removing it. Because if people's preconceptions were that was the case, that you had to have it, by simply saying that you didn't, we opened the doors much further. That should say if. I don't know what's happened to my if. It's a bit of an iffy if. But so the question I really want to ask you, or to pose to you, is really, what if you could change the way in which you recruited people? What if you were to look at the things that might get in the way, that might detract? What if you could make small incremental changes to the way in which you write copy, into the shortlisting criteria, into the use of certain characteristics or not in looking at selection? What could that change? Could it make available to you a whole range of different people who would be highly, highly talented? Or do you want to suggest that you stay with the current pool that you've got and just be comfortable that you're getting good people from a good pool? Because it seems to me that if they are the best, then making these changes won't really matter. They'll still rise to the top. They'll still be the highest performers. There was a young lady that came to speak to me, very, very irate about the decision that we'd made, saying, you know, I've just spent all this money on university education and you're not saying it's valuable now. And I said, as far as I'm concerned, if you find it valuable, it is valuable. All I'm saying is you still need to be judged by the same criteria as everyone else. And if you're the best, you will be the best. There is no difference there. And my final point before I leave you is to say, those small changes can be really beneficial for your organisation. But not only that, they have a bigger impact. And the bigger impact is this. If you look at any study around social mobility within the UK, if you look at the expectations and the aspirations of people who are coming from working class, even lower middle class backgrounds, and there was a study done recently, their expectations and their aspirations, their ability to be able to progress within society are significantly lower than those coming from middle and upper class backgrounds. Now, I think we've got a responsibility as employers within the UK to challenge those preconceptions. Not only because I think it would be good for our organisation, but actually because I think it's good for the economy. And not only is it good for the economy, it's also good for the individuals themselves, for their families, for the areas in which they grew up and the areas in which they work. So ultimately we create a win-win. By opening doors, by taking down barriers, by being more inclusive in which the way that we hire people, we can actually challenge preconceptions about what talent and potential are, and we can create a situation that's positive for everyone involved. Thank you.